Well, we are going to get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Abby Edwards, and I use she and her pronouns. And I'm joined by my colleagues Brandon and Sarah, and also our technical assistance provider, Civics. And Michelle is the one from Civics on the line. So you'll hear from us throughout this session, but we're really happy you all are here. So we want to begin the meeting by acknowledging that the state of California exists on the occupied territory of over 110 federally recognized tribes and over 70 non-federally recognized tribes. This land has been stewarded by indigenous people since time memorial, and we acknowledge the critical importance of these lands and waters to the indigenous people of California today. We at the Office of Planning and Research today join you all from Sacramento, California, on the ancestral territory of the Southern Maidu, the Valley Miwok, Patwin, and Nisenan people. So we are a community all here that includes people with a wide range of access needs. Some of us get our access needs met day to day by dominant culture, and others do not. So we'd really like to cultivate a space that works together as a community to listen to access needs and work together towards meeting them. So with that in mind, I have a couple of just like requests, reminders for the group. So when you're participating, maybe in the Q&A portion at the end, say your name before you speak. It's okay to turn off your video and still be present. It's okay to be here and not be feeling 100%. If you could help people on the phone or with visual impairments see what's happening on video or chat by saying it out loud, that would be really helpful. It's okay to moderate how much you want to interact today. And if you need a break and step away, that is all good. We're here for it. So if anyone has an access request that would support your participation in this call or with us at OPR more generally, we invite you to share that in the chat, either privately with me, one of the other co-hosts from the team, with the group, by email, any way to give us feedback on the accessibility of these meetings, and then also just participation in the programs in general. So if you're all up for it, if you could share your name and your organization, current location, so we can understand who's in the room with us today, that would be really helpful.
This is Phil and Beth. Oh, Phil and Beth Prinz from Sustainable Ramona.
Hi, thank you for joining us. We're happy to have you on the call. For others, oh yeah, we can have questions at the end of the meeting, if that's okay, or please feel free to add any questions in the chat while we're getting through the bulk of this presentation.
Great.
Thank you. So today we have a really packed agenda. So we're going to start by giving an overview of the APGP program. So we're going to talk through the application process in great detail, and then we're going to spend some time on the ICARP grant mapping tool and do a demonstration of that. We anticipate the presentation portion of today taking about 45 minutes to an hour. Last I checked, we had 56 slides, so thank you in advance for bearing with us through the presentation. It's a lot of information, but we're hoping, we're recording it today to post it on our website. We hope it can really be a resource for people as they engage with the program and give sort of that overview of all the different pieces. And then we're going to spend some time at the end doing general Q&A. So for that Q&A portion, if you do have technical questions that are specific to your projects, you can follow up with us by email or attend our office hours that happen weekly. We really hope that the Q&A today can remain broadly applicable to most attendees of the call. And then we're also going to have breakout rooms, which will be kind of more intimate conversations. So we're going to have one with the TA provider, and Michelle is going to facilitate that breakout room. And then we're also going to have one with APGP staff. So just a time to get into more details about the specifics of the technical assistance program, and then also just general questions about the program. So to get us started, we wanted to first spend a little bit of time on definitions. In the guidelines, one of the first things that we do is we define adaptation. Since it's a centerpiece of the program, we feel like it's really important to share what our understanding of climate adaptation is, how it's connected to and differs from resilience and also mitigation. So, according to the state's Planning and Investing for Resilient California guidebook, adaptation is an adjustment in natural or human systems to a new or changing environment, whereas resilience describes the capacity of any entity to prepare for disruptions, recover from shocks and stresses, and adapt and grow from a disruption. So California communities, as we all know, are really experiencing more frequent, prolonged, and severe impacts of climate change, including flooding, wildfires, drought, extreme heat, extreme weather. So preparing for these changes is adaptation. It's also important to note that addressing climate change really relies on both mitigation and adaptation. Communities should really take advantage of strategies that support both goals. So for example, homes that install solar panels and battery storage systems are better protected against climate change disruptions and to the electricity supply grid. That's an adaptation effort. But solar panels that generate electricity without GHGs and allow homes to use less energy from GHG emitting power plants, that's a mitigation effort. However, there's potential for conflict here. So a notable example is centered on extreme heat. So consider a program to install air conditioning and systems in homes. While that can help protect residents against extreme heat and adaptation effort, these systems will also require more energy to run and could increase GHG emissions if the energy source is not carbon-free, so working against mitigation efforts. So it's really essential to reduce emissions and plan for impact simultaneously, because efforts to adapt will be overwhelmed by the harm done by climate change if emissions are not reduced. So through our program, you'll really see, that we're hoping for these projects to be centered on climate adaptation, but then also be considering the co-benefits of different projects and how they can also be reducing GHG. So for a little bit of a policy background, our current state law requires that considerations for climate change and associated risk be integrated into general plans through SB 379, climate adaptation plans through SB 1035, local coastal programs, with further incentives to integrate adaptation into local and multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plans. So these plans really guide the development of long-term community vision, infrastructure investments, community health and safety, emergency response and hazard mitigation, as well as economic development. And recent reports have really found that many jurisdictions lack the capacity, resources, and funding to make these updates. So in part, the Adaptation Planning Grant Program was really brought about to address these gaps. So kind of the enabling statute for the program through SB 170, which is the Budget Act, and SB 154. So these two budgets really invested $54 billion in climate. And the current proposed budget maintains 48.3 billion for it. But the legislation specifically authorized ICARP to develop 3 new grant programs to provide direct funding to support local, regional, and tribal adaptation planning and infrastructure efforts throughout California. So a lot of you probably know about the different programs that are under the ICARP umbrella. We have the Regional Resilience Grant Program, we have the Extreme Heat and Community Resilience Program, and also the Adaptation Planning Grant Program. And all these different programs have come about over the last couple of years. The Adaptation Planning Grant Program is the one that we'll spend most of the time talking about today. But the Regional Resilience Program really aims to support local, regional, and tribal entities' regional scale climate resilience solutions. And they just awarded $21 million to 16 projects this year. And then the Extreme Heat and Community Resilience Program will fund both planning and implementation projects to reduce the impacts of extreme heat and build community resilience. And that program has their round 1 application live right now. And so that program and APGP round 2 are going to be running pretty simultaneously. And so we're super happy as program staff to answer any questions about the details of the program and which program might be a good fit for you. So just zooming into the APGP program, we have 2 rounds available. So the first round we gave out 8 million, was awarded with grants ranging from 150 to 650,000. And we now have round 2, which is currently available. So that's those rounds are from 100,000 to 650,000. And the application is live now, and that's why we're all here. So we're really excited to talk through the details. A couple significant changes for this round. We have third-party technical assistance, which we've mentioned. We also have advanced pay for nonprofit lead applicants. And then we also, throughout the full process, have made different refinements and tweaks to the program to make it more accessible and more clear throughout feedback that we've received. So that sort of leads us to our public engagement process. We've done a lot of engagement over the last couple of years. We kind of had kickoff listening sessions at the very beginning, sort of like middle 2022, to really help set the foundation and framework for the program. We then had application and guideline workshops. We received a lot of public comments for the first round, made a lot of edits to the round 1 guidelines. We had application office hours. We then, after we awarded applicants, we did debrief conversations with unawarded applications, and received a lot of feedback through that process too. And we had key interviews from people and had a survey live. So we've done a lot of sort of receiving of information from folks on how to further refine the program. And so a lot of those changes all kind of are reflected in the round 2 program that we have set up. So some of the key themes throughout the full process are really to meet organizational needs through our eligible costs and activities, to really help support planning grant activities to implementation funding. We're aware, as an adaptation planning grant program, we just have funding that's available for planning. And so in that, really folks are wanting to see sustainable models of how to get the funding longer term to do infrastructure projects. Also, consistent feedback on how to increase accessibility of the grant application process. We received a lot of feedback on our first round around extending word counts. I think we really wanted to have limited word counts to make it more accessible, but folks found that be a limited factor in some ways too. So we kind of went through that balance for developing the application for this time around. And then also more guidance on the letters of support, partnership, and budget areas. So those are all changes that you'll see reflected in our second round of funding. So to give you a sense of what engagement looked like for our first round, Brandon put together this map with our climate services team. So you'll see the purple dots are sort of where folks submitted intent to apply to the program. The blue circles, you'll see where the full applications were submitted. And then the green ones, you'll see where there were awarded projects. So you'll see that we got a lot of engagement. And then there are also gaps that we're hoping to be able to fill through our second round of funding as well. And you'll see that reflected in some of the changes that we've made to the program as well. So those are sort of the broad strokes, higher level of the program. So I wanted to talk through this next section, some of the key priorities of the program and some of the things that you'll see reflected in the guidelines as you're walking through. And then once I get through the broader overviews, I'm going to hand it over to Brandon, and Brandon will talk through some of the nuts and bolts of the application. And then Sarah is going to talk through the ICARP grant tool demo that we're using for some of the funding targets that I'll mention in a bit. So kind of talking through all that engagement that I talked about, through all the feedback, through kind of all of our project development, program development, we've refined key program priorities. So they're centered in the guidelines, and they're also here. The first one is to really enhance accessibility and diversity. So that's minimizing barriers for diverse applicants and ensuring geographic, economic, and demographic representation. Really prioritizing vulnerable communities. So that's adopting an all-risk approach for various climate impacts and also encouraging community preparedness for cascading impacts. really focusing on integrated infrastructure planning, so focusing on social and physical infrastructure integration, building community resilience, and also elevating equity in the planning process. So you'll see more details in the guidelines here, but those are some of the key priorities for the program. So this is just an overview of who's eligible and what are some of the eligible activities. So again, you'll see these in our guidelines, but eligible applicants are local public entities, California Native American tribes, community-based organizations, and you'll see that not limited to 501c3 nonprofits, NGOs, philanthropic organizations, and other organizations with a history of representing vulnerable communities. And ineligible for the program are for-profit entities and also state agencies. And we also have some partnership requirements that we'll go into more detail below. And for the eligible activities, again, as I've mentioned, adaptation is the main focus of the program, with an emphasis on planning. We've centered eligible activities around the California Adaptation Planning Guide, which is a 4-phase process of how communities can focus on climate adaptation. And so you'll see that our eligible activities are sort of categorized based on those 4 phases. And then again, similar to last round, not a lot of this has changed. We can't fund implementation or construction projects, and we also can't fund CEQA or MUFA work. So for this round, we have funding targets as we did last time. So these are not the only projects that we fund, but we have some of our prioritization around these funding targets. So we basically have 3 of these targets. So the first one is California Native American tribes, disadvantaged communities, and small and rural communities. That's really due to their increased vulnerability to climate risks, the limited resources for adaptation and recovery. So also recognizing the unique challenges that these different groups face and the crucial role that they play in enhancing the state adaptation potential. And so you'll see this also outlined in our guidelines, how we're thinking about and defining these funding targets, and then how they're prioritized throughout the process as well. And then also in round 1, we had some of these core project components, but we weren't as explicit. So in this time, we highlighted 4 project components that we want to see through the program and through each application. And so the first one is really centered on partnerships. And so they mentioned the partnership requirements. So either the lead applicant or one of the co-applicants should be a public entity or a tribe. And community-based organizations should partner with a local public entity or a tribe to ensure that the planning efforts funded can ultimately be implemented by local, regional, or tribal entities. And then also public entities should partner with community-based organizations to ensure that planning efforts are centering the needs of vulnerable communities. So we also, as a program, understand that in these cases, one size doesn't necessarily fit all. And so in these cases, we'll also accept the justification as to why partnership with a public entity or a community-based organization is not feasible. And you'll see in the guidelines a lot more detail here for you to dive into if a justification is the route that you need to go. And this time around, we've clarified some of the scoring criteria around justifications as well. So the next project, core project component is to prioritize vulnerable communities. So similar to last year, all applicants are really urged to consider and address how their projects will serve members of vulnerable communities, including access and functional needs communities, tribal communities, rural communities, and disadvantaged communities. So disparities in vulnerable communities really arise from various factors, including physical, social, political, and economic factors, which are exacerbated by climate change. These factors can encompass race, class, sexual orientation, identification, national origin, income inequality, a lot of these different areas. So in order to identify climate vulnerable communities, applicants are provided with tools and data in the guidelines, recognizing that no single tool can comprehensively address sort of all vulnerable communities. So we have a list there for folks to be able to choose how they describe their community's vulnerability. So that's the second core project component. So the first was the partnerships. The next is prioritizing vulnerable communities. The next is plan alignment. And so this is where projects really should align with jurisdiction and goals or policies that are already in place. So not all plans also are perfect and may require updating. And so if that's the case, if you're kind of setting a new adaptation plan for a local government or a local area, we just require an explanation, sort of how it still aligns with APGP priorities. And then also all projects should align with the best available science. So in our guidelines, we also reference the California climate change assessments, CalAdapt, traditional knowledges, and additional resources that people can pull upon to ensure that their projects are using the best available science. And then the last one of the core project components is really thinking about integrating financing strategies. So in order to ensure project sustainability, it's really crucial to integrate state or federal infrastructure grant alignment or financing solutions into their adaptation planning projects. So we're really hoping that folks can strategically integrate state or federal infrastructure grants or other financing solutions into their climate adaptation planning to be able to unlock sustainable funding mechanisms that extend beyond sort of the initial scope of the project phases. So this is again feedback that we've heard around, this is just a planning grant. How can we align planning with and not just have a plan that sits on the shelf? So that's really our attempt at that. So those are the core project components. Now moving right into the scoring criteria, and Brandon is going to go into more detail on sort of how this is reflected in the application process. And our scoring criteria hasn't really changed since the first round for those of you that are familiar. So we still have the project vision and description. So that's presenting comprehensive project overview, including key program components, partnership, alignment, all the things that I just described. There's the community need and adaptive capacity section. So again, this is using existing information about vulnerable communities, their involvement, how the project will address their needs. Then there's co-benefits, which kind of brings us back to the top of the presentation on how the project will really prioritize strategies that provide climate adaptation co-benefits. And then community partnership, a work plan and budget, and then also a final interview. So these are for top scoring applicants to participate in the finalist interview. So all of this you'll see in Appendix E in a lot of detail of how we're asking questions and how we're going to be scoring each of these sections. So hopefully that will give a pretty good overview of what we're looking for. And then the last piece on sort of this like broad program overview is the technical assistance. So as we've mentioned, we have technical assistance available for round 2, and we're really excited about it. So we are going to be giving priority to applicants from those funding targets that we described. So that includes California Native American tribes, disadvantaged communities, and small and rural communities. So applicants that are interested in this technical assistance should submit the pre-application interest form by March 18th. And then early submission really ensures prioritization through the process. We will accept on a rolling basis after that. And I apologize, this is March 15th, but it's March 18th. So just wanting to go over the process a little bit. So APGP and the TA provider will collaborate with applicants to tailor the assistance of the applicant needs. And so APGP and the TA provider will work with the applicant to define the scope, the scale, and the timeline of the direct application technical assistance. OPR staff will also notify applicants of their prioritized assistance status. And just because some applicants receive assistance, that doesn't necessarily guarantee a grant award. And so really to maximize your chances of success, we encourage you to really submit the application or the pre-application interest survey as soon as you can. And in order for us to be able to prioritize your application and get you connected with a TA provider. So this list isn't comprehensive, but these are some of the things that we're looking to provide for the technical assistance. So this is clarification of requirements and guidelines during the application development, provision of frameworks, tools, and templates for APGP applicant use in the proposals, and then also direct assistance, including answering TA questions, reviewing proposed responses, providing partnership support, providing work plan or budget support. So once you are selected for the technical assistance, you'll get connected with a TA provider and you'll get into sort of all these details. And if you're interested, you should join the TA breakout room where Michelle will kind of talk through the overview and get into some of the details of what that correspondence will look like and what the expectations will be, and answer more questions around that. So last thing for me, this is just an overview of the timeline and what to expect, and then I'll hand it over to Brandon. So again, we did more program engagement and development over the past summer. We had a public comment period that we wrapped up in January. Our application window is open from mid-February to mid-May. And then we're planning to announce awards at the end of summer. So that was a lot of information from me. I hope I didn't talk too quickly. And I'm now going to hand it over to Brandon, who's going to get into the weeds of the application and sort of screenshots of the interface and what to expect through the process. So Brandon, over to you.
Great. Thanks so much for that overview, Abby. So zooming into the application, which I'm sure you're all eager to dive into, we first have this quick snapshot of the application timeline. So as mentioned, on February 16th, we launched the NOFA guidelines and application. On March 18th, which is fast approaching, we have the priority due date for pre-applications to be considered for technical assistance. On May 6th is the final due date for pre-applications, and May 20th is the final due date for all application materials, including the main application. And you can also find this timeline on the Adaptation Planning Grant webpage that Sarah shared earlier. So the application process, it's going to be a lot similar to last year for some of those familiar faces who also applied in round one. Our application process consists of 2 phases or steps. And the first step is to complete a pre-application interest form. One representative from each project team must begin the pre-application interest form, but will have the option to add additional collaborators to the form. And collaborators are essentially just users with separate accounts who can access and support in the development of the application form. The pre-applications are accepted on a rolling basis through the 6th. However, as Abby mentioned, APGP staff strongly encourage folks to fill it out as soon as possible before the 18th if they want to be considered for TA. And then the second and final step is the main application form. After applicants complete the pre-application interest form, you'll be sent a link to the main application form. And main applications are, again, due at 5 p.m. on the 20th of May, and that main application will include general narrative questions. It will include a workbook, which contains the work plan and budget, and it will also provide you an opportunity to upload letters of support. Now, taking a bit closer of a look at the pre-application interest form, this image on the right is going to be what it looks like when you click the link. Project teams must complete this interest form by no later than May 6th. And we really have a short, I would say, amount of questions at the beginning, asking high-level information, nothing too in-depth. Beyond this being a necessary step to gain access to the main application form, we really just want to get to know your project better, potentially ask clarifying questions, and this will be the first step. If you're interested in being considered for technical assistance, we will use the form as sort of like an intake form for application technical assistance. Next slide, thanks. I also wanted to note that in order to receive TA, we're really, oh, sorry, I got a comment. Okay. The pre-application forms will not be scored. And so this is something that I will sort of overstate this in the presentation. Pre-applications are not scored. but they will consist of a few sections that we want folks to pay attention to. The first one being project information. This section, we're going to ask high-level information about your project, and you'll have the opportunity to add folks to help you help support you in the completion of this survey. The top right, it's small on my screen. Hopefully, it's larger on your screen. There's a button that says Manage Collaborators, and that will allow you to add additional users, folks from your team, co-applicants, third-party consultants, etc. And then the next section is applicant information. Then, okay, great. Yeah, it is a bit small. We'll try to enlarge these images for y'all. If you click the link that Sarah sent, you'll be able to see this sort of up close and personal after you create a profile. But the applicant information section, we're really just trying to get an understanding of the names of your organizations, the types of organizations that you are, and you'll be able to see under each question will reference sections of the guidelines that will help you in completing that part of the survey. In this case, we have linked to the applicant eligibility section of the guidelines to help you determine if your organization is eligible or not. Oh, thanks. It looks like Angel just sent a comment. You can individually zoom in to these photos as well. Thanks. It's very helpful. So the next part of the survey and final part is the request for technical assistance section. So to aid in the development of competitive proposals, APGP will provide application TA to eligible applicants through the third-party provider Civics, who we have joining us on the call. Really happy to have them this year to support. As I mentioned previously, if you're interested, please get those surveys in. Due date is fast approaching. OPR will prioritize technical assistance for applicants from funding target communities, which includes, as Abby mentioned, California Native American tribes, disadvantaged communities, and small and rural communities, and those expressing capacity needs by March 18th. Application technical assistance includes support with topics like clarification of requirements, direct assistance with TA questions, reviewing proposed responses, et cetera. Some of those things are sort of redundant from what Abby had already mentioned. And what we really want to emphasize here is if you click yes on this request for TA, you'll be prompted with additional screening questions for your funding target status. And you see that question on the screen. Does your project directly represent a funding target? If you click this, you will be forwarded to the next section with more information on our funding targets. And my colleague Sarah will sort of go into give you a few more slides to show you how to use that mapping tool as well. But then once you're done with that, click submit. You're done. You'll receive a notification from us with instructions on how to get to the main application. Next slide, please. You'll see here we have step-by-steps on how to use that mapping tool as well. So in case you don't remember everything, every little bit of Sarah's presentation that's coming, you can always refer back to these instructions. They're pretty straightforward. It's just 10 easy steps. Next slide, please. Oh, those are the steps in the square. Thanks. So after submitting the pre-application, each applicant will receive an automated email from Submittable that looks like this, containing the link to the main application form, and that email invitation from Submittable will include, next slide please, this little link here in the box. Click that and that takes you to the main application. Of note, you will need to re-add those collaborators or additional collaborators from the interest survey. If you would like to add new folks, I think this is a great time for that as well. Next slide, please. So similar to the pre-application, the main application form has a few sections, starting with a few simple questions about the project name, applicant name, organization type. The real substantive portions of the main application will be the narrative questions, the work plan and budget workbook, and the letters of support. Finalist applicants will be invited to an additional step, which is the finalist interview, where the project team will be asked additional questions, but those questions and that step is outlined further in the guidelines. I'm going to give a quick high-level overview of the main application now, but applicants can, of course, find more detailed information in the guidelines. So the first section is the narrative questions, and each team is responsible for completing these questions. For the overall proposal, we strongly encourage each project team to answer these as complete as you can. We're much more generous this year with word counts. That's a big feedback we got last year, was that the word counts were quite limiting. So for each of the 5 required sections, we have a total of 13 questions, and each question will include a word count. If you look at the image here on the screen, you can see the little word count on the bottom. And in some instances, we give applicants the opportunity to upload additional images and graphics and maps. So hopefully that's helpful. And then when answering each question, please be sure to review the appropriate scoring criteria in the guidelines to gain more information and improve your score ultimately. Each question will have links with recommended sections to the guidelines for you to review to really support you in the development of your answer. Next slide, please. So the application workbook and it does contain the work plan and budget, which we have conveniently linked here for you to be able to download. It says download the project workbook. Similar to last year, we'll have a few tabs where folks will be able to add information about specifics about their project work plan. So breaking down your project by task, and then accompanying budget to accommodate or to support the work plan and give us a little bit more detail about the specifics of your project. You might have. So the plan contains. Sorry, I'm getting.
Sorry, Brandon, you might need to repeat that. You're breaking up a little bit for us.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Where was I? Okay, I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Sorry, I'm having unstable internet.
No worries. Feel free to turn off your camera if you want. I'll do the same.
Okay, thank you. So as I mentioned, the workbook contains the work plan and the budget. There's an additional tab with examples and references to help guide applicants through this process. Please don't copy those examples as they are purely demonstrative and should not be mistaken for actual work plans or budgets. That being said, the applicant work plans should have clear timelines, discrete tasks, and detailed deliverables. And the budget line items should clearly align with those tasks described in the work plans. So please double check that all the project numbers, names of tasks, and applicant information are correct. And again, if you experience any difficulty with the workbook, whether it be formatting, formulas, or functionality, please don't hesitate to contact me, Brandon Harrell. I'm here to help. Thanks. Happy to drop my email address in the chat. This is what the one of the tabs of the workbook looks like. This is specifically the budget tab. We really encourage folks to just double check the thresholds you see highlighted there in yellow. And these are the thresholds for your direct and indirect costs. The workbook comes preloaded with a formula that will auto-calculate these percentages as you enter your budget information. So please don't tamper with those formulas. But again, if you have any specific questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Next slide, please. So one letter of support from each co-applicant on the project is encouraged, with up to 5 letters of support representing your local and or regional communities. This could include CBOs, elected officials, appointed leaders, and we just really encourage folks to try and try to have the letters of support really give us a better picture of the holistic nature of your projects. So this could be emphasizing the community partnership, conveying community support, or really helping us to understand maybe why why you might be lacking a partnership, right? The partnership justification section, or why a particular section of the budget looks the way it does. These letters of support can be really helpful, and we don't monitor the word count of letters of support either, which is great. And then you'll have the ability this year to upload all letters of support directly in the application form, and that section of the application looks exactly like the image that we have up on the screen. So that concludes the nuts and bolts section of the application. I'm going to be recording a demo of me sort of going through the pre-application and the main application for folks, and posting that on our website, and then sending that to folks who attended this workshop. So look out for that. And I will pass this slide off to Abby.
Thanks, Brandon. Yeah, so that's the application process. And then in terms of next steps and support, we, as I mentioned, and as we've mentioned throughout, there's the pre-application interest form, and the prioritization timeline for technical assistance. We'll also have office hours. We did this last time around, and it was really fun for us to get to sort of engage with folks that were applying to the program and help us understand areas that needed clarification as well. And so staff will be on office hours every Thursday from 1 to 2. We are doing it sort of as a first come, first serve basis. And so we'll have different staff in breakout rooms and let folks in, and each person should get about 10 minutes with staff. And then we also have application workshops coming up. So we have a couple workshops in March, and then one in February or April, and then one in March. And for the ones at the later date, we might have some more specialized. We might have some grantees from our first round come and share. We might have different opportunities, and we also have a question in our pre-application interest form for any ideas folks might have on what they'd like to see through the application workshop. So feel free to fill that out. We'll also be developing an FAQ as questions come through, so that everyone has sort of access to the same information. And then lastly, just an invitation here, if there are any opportunities that you all have or see that would be a good place for us to talk about this grant in your community, in your local government, at a meeting, at a work group, anything, we're happy to come and share about the program. We have really short presentations that we can give as well. So this is an open ask if you all want to invite us to come to your space to talk about the program. And with that, I will hand it over to Sarah on our team, who's going to give a quick demonstration of how to use the ICARP grants mapping tool. And this tool, you'll see the steps really clearly outlined in the guidelines, and it's sort of how to kind of define some of your eligibility for the funding targets. So Sarah, over to you.
Great, thanks Abby. Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Samden and I'm a senior adaptation resilience planner on the adaptation planning grant team. The ICARP grants mapping tool was created by our ICARP program staff to assist applicants in determining if their project areas qualify for the DAC and small and rural communities funding targets. While this demo will focus on qualifying for the DAF funding target, the steps on how to navigate the tool are similar for qualifying for the small and rural funding target. Next slide, please. So as we mentioned earlier, APGP intends to award 4 or more qualifying projects that directly benefit disadvantaged communities by ensuring that at least 51% of a project area is comprised of disadvantaged communities. APGP's definition of a disadvantaged community includes both the disadvantaged community designations per SB 535 and the low income designation per AB 1550. The mapping tool uses data from 3 different sources, including CalEnviroscreen 4.0, CARB's Priority Populations Map, and Department of Water Resources Disadvantaged Communities Mapping Tool. More information on the mapping tool can be found in Appendix J of the guidelines. So to start using the tool, you're going to open up the link that we have included in the guidelines and in the chat. And once you open the link, you will see various layers on the left pane of the screen. You can select the box next to any relevant layer from the layers menu that says DAC in the name to qualify for the DAC funding target. In this case, we are demonstrating how you can use the DAC census track. Next slide. Great. And so then afterwards, you're going to click on the search icon in the top left corner of the mapping pane. It looks like a little identifying glass on your screen. And this is where you can type in the direct location of your project area. A drop-down menu will appear with a list of options, and then you will be able to select which one best meets your project location. Next slide. And so in this example, we are looking at Bakersfield. And once you type in your location, it'll zoom into the project area on the map, and you have the opportunity to move around and identify where exactly your project area will take place. And below the layers pane, you'll see another set of options called the DAC percentage. You will want to select the box next to the corresponding layer that matches your percentage. Afterwards, you're going to be directed to a next screen where you'll select the box that says Use Spatial Filter to limit features. And then you'll select the option that says Only features intersecting a user-defined area. And you want to select this option so that you can specifically draw the entire area that your project will be in. And we have found that the freehand polygon tool seems to be the best use because you're able to really get in there and get in the intricacies of where your project will intersect. And after you select the tool, you'll be able to draw it as we've shown on the screen. Then you will initiate the polygon. To initiate the polygon, you'll press down and release upon completion, and then click Apply. And once your polygon has been drawn, you will see a DAC pie chart on the left side of the layers pane. The blue represents census tracts that are DAC, and the orange represents census tracts that are not DAC. If your project geographical boundary is over 51%, your project meets the criteria for the DAC funding target. After you've identified your project's boundary, you will take a screenshot of your map, making sure to include the pie charts on the left. And you'll want to include this screenshot in your pre-application submission and in your full application. And this process will look very similar for applicants looking to meet the small and rural communities funding target. For that part, you will be selecting the small and rural communities layer and then the corresponding pie chart. And just a reminder, to qualify for this funding target, small and rural communities must be situated 100% outside of the contiguous urban areas with populations fewer than 75,000 and designated as low income per AB 1550. And that is how you use the ICARP's grants mapping tool.
Thank you, Sarah. There's a couple questions that have come through the chat that I'll read to you. So one of the questions is there a way to select a county boundary, or do they have to draw it?
That is a great question. I think there is an opportunity to do either or. So I think you can do both. I think you can either select a county boundary and then from that layers find your specific county, and then you also have the opportunity to draw it out.
Great, and yeah, Sarah used a demonstration of using the DAC census tract, so you'll see that represented in this demo. But please feel free to open up the link and poke around, look at your community, and send us an email with any questions that might come up for you too as you're navigating the tool. Okay, another question from Hannah. So I'm just gonna read it out loud. So we can take questions on the ICARP grants tool right now, and then we can do general questions too, because that's the rest of the presentation that we have for you. So this question and Brandon and Sarah are really the experts on this tool. So I will read it, and then either one of you, please feel free to weigh in. So it says, our boundary is pretty hard to hand draw. We have it mapped in GIS. Can we just export this data and add it in our GIS, our desktop GIS application? Or can we upload our boundary layer into the web version? I don't fully understand, but that's because I'm not an expert. So Brandon or Sarah, please feel free to respond to this question.
Yeah, I can answer this. Hannah, great question. Our tool currently does not have the functionality to import data like shape files, but we have our extreme heat program. Someone has also asked that question and requested that ability. So it's something we're looking into for like a version 2.0, but it's something we don't currently accommodate, unfortunately. But I would be happy to chat with you at office hours to see how we might be able to best accommodate your situation.
Great. Does that sound like it answered your question, Hannah?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, that answered my question. I have used some other tools like this, like from DWR, and they allowed you to upload a layer. So that might be a good resource for you to look into to allow us to do the same.
Cool.
Yeah,
Thanks for the
that's a
feedback. We'll look into it.
great point.
All right. Another question from Casey. Casey, do you want to read it? Or do you want me to read it? Either way. Okay, I will go for it. So the question is, some of our census tracts are not coterminous within our city limits, i.e. they extend beyond our city limits. How do we factor that in?
That's another great question. So we have that's not uncommon. So many cities have census tracts that are not coterminous. In those instances, if you click on our cities mapping tool or the city option, it's that second option there in the layers pane. It's going to automatically include those census tracts whose center falls within the traditional boundaries of your city. But there is the option to individually select census tracts as well. But that's sort of just like the default nature of that cities and unincorporated places layer. We can, of course, get more precise with the census tract option, which might be the best use case for you.
Great. And we will also share our emails, and we also have office hours where we can get into some of the details as well. I'm seeing another question from Tracy. So I'll read them, and then if there's other things, other context folks would like to weigh in, please interrupt me and weigh in. So this question is, if we are not 51% DAC or small and rural, then are we not eligible for funding? So it's a great question, and you are definitely eligible for funding. So we've emphasized that for prioritizing the technical assistance for applicants. And then also we have it elevated through the scoring criteria. But if you fall under sort of the eligible applicants and eligible activities, you're eligible to apply to the program. We just have placed some extra priority on disadvantaged communities, small and rural communities, and tribal communities. And you'll see that all outlined pretty clearly in the guidelines. So happy to answer some specifics, but definitely still eligible to apply. All right, I'm seeing another question from Angel. What if we serve small areas within a couple of counties that aren't connected? This is a great question. Brandon?
Yeah, this is a great question. I'm assuming you're referring to maybe like funding target communities that are disconnected or incongruous. In that situation, I think we would just encourage you to look up those communities individually, because if you're focusing, if those are your areas of focus, then I would definitely focus on those. If you try to use a whole of county approach, it may not be accurate to the essence of your project or authentic to the scope of your project. So I would definitely recommend you doing multiple screenshots of the process that Sarah went through. That's not uncommon. I think there are a few regional projects we saw last year that had that served smaller communities within multiple counties. Yeah, thanks for the question.
Yeah, great question. All right, so there is another question around the EJ element. So they're saying in creating EJ elements, jurisdictions that are 75% DAC are required to work on this. Do you know if the state will be going with the 51% in the future to match this funding program? So those are two separate processes. So I don't think I can speak to that. I think we can consider whether or not we want to go to 75% or have, I think a lot of different programs have different ways where they define disadvantaged communities and percentages there. So no comment necessarily on that front, whether the direction that the state will go. They will say that the programs are really looking to try and align and use tools. That's like, as Sarah mentioned, this tool is really looking at these different types of tools and compiling them to make sure that we're comprehensive in the way that we're defining disadvantaged communities based on a lot of feedback that we've received. So yes, no clarity on what direction the state will be going, but know that within our program, we're really trying to be comprehensive of the tools that are out there. All right, seeing another question. So for the 51% DAC, is it a specific project within our local jurisdiction or the entire census area? For the 51% DAC, is it a specific project area within our local jurisdiction or the entire census area?
Hey, Abby, I actually have a little bit more of a specific question, if you don't mind me just getting
Please,
a little bit
go
more
for it.
specific. So I'm looking at the DAC map right now. And so we have certain areas that are both low income and considered disadvantaged according to the DAC map. But then we have more affluent areas that are still considered to be low income, but they're not considered disadvantaged. And so I'm trying to figure out where in the entire project area does it have to be specific. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does make sense. I'm gonna answer that, and then Sarah, Brandon, please weigh in, and then Galen, please tell me if it's answering your question. So we have the way that we're defining disadvantaged is through any of those different criteria. And so if you select the different census tracts that are within your project area, and then you get the pie chart spit out based on all the different areas, census tracts that you're supporting. If it's above 51%, then you'll qualify. And it's using sort of those different screening criteria, those different tools that we mentioned. So the low income and the disadvantaged community parameters. So does that answer your question? So basically the pie chart will tell you once you select kind of everything that represents your project area.
That makes sense. I'm just thinking about so is it just based on how I draw the polygon, essentially?
Yeah.
Okay. Just because I don't I'm pretty sure we have communities that are eligible in terms of how we're going to draw the pie chart, but also we do have affluent areas as well. But
Yeah.
it's a little bit hazy for disadvantaged communities in terms of 51% of a project area. So I guess it's just trying to define the scope of the project area. And I'm assuming that we're going to be explaining that within the overall application, correct?
Exactly.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's a good one. Perfect. A lot of great questions about the tools. I always think that that's a really good sign that people are actually opening it up and exploring it. So thank you for that. We will continue to answer questions. So we wanted to If there are any other general questions that have come up for folks, happy to answer them now. But we also wanted to create some breakout rooms. One breakout room for folks that can go over and chat with Michelle and talk through the TA process, expectations, what more about who civics is, any of that information. And then also another breakout room just with APGP staff where you can answer some more general questions. So I'm going to get that set up right now for the room. So just give me 1 minute. And let's see.